Fire her! Fire that black maid immediately! Mr. Harrison hissed into his lapel mic, eyes darting nervously toward the Chinese billionaire approaching the lobby. She can't be anywhere near this meeting. The gleaming marble floor of the Wellington Palace Hotel reflected the chandelier's crystal light as the hotel's general manager straightened his tie and plastered on his most welcoming smile. Mr. Zhang, whose investment group controlled billions in hospitality assets, stepped through the grand entrance with his entourage of 6 impeccably dressed associates. "Welcome to the Wellington!" Harrison extended his hand, but Zhang immediately launched into rapid-fire Mandarin, his tone clearly questioning. Harrison's smile froze as panic flooded his system. He frantically fumbled for his smartphone translation app, tapping desperately as sweat beaded on his forehead. The robotic voice that emerged butchered the pronunciation so badly that Mr. Zhang visibly winced. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Zhang, but I'm afraid none of our staff speak Mandarin," Harrison admitted, watching his career crumble before his eyes. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The opulent lobby fell silent as Zhang's entourage exchanged knowing glances. Zhang's expression hardened, his fingers tightening around the leather briefcase rumored to contain contracts worth millions. Behind them, a black woman in a gray housekeeping uniform, the same maid Harrison had just ordered removed, quietly pushed her cleaning cart past the tense scene. Her eyes briefly met the billionaire's before looking away, her face revealing nothing. No one noticed her presence as the drama unfolded. No one could see the Harvard diploma and Beijing University master's degree hanging in her tiny apartment. And no one had any idea that in just a few hours, she would change everything. 3 hours earlier, the Wellington Palace Hotel had been a whirlwind of activity. The 5-star establishment, known for hosting dignitaries and celebrities, was preparing for perhaps its most important guest yet. "Mr. Zhang arrives at precisely 2 p.m., Harrison announced during the emergency staff meeting, pacing the employee break room with military precision. His investment group controls over 30 luxury properties worldwide, and he's considering adding the Wellington to his portfolio." He straightened his already impeccable tie. "This could mean international expansion for all of us." The department heads nodded eagerly. The head chef described the authentic Chinese delicacies being prepared. The maintenance supervisor confirmed the presidential suite's temperature was set to exactly 72 degrees. Mr. Zhang's preference according to his assistant's detailed instructions. The concierge had arranged VIP access to the city's most exclusive venues. "Remember," Harrison's voice dropped an octave, his eyes scanning each face. "Mr. Zhang's net worth exceeds the GDP of several small nations. One misstep, and we can kiss this opportunity goodbye." The front desk manager raised her hand tentatively. "Sir, I heard Mr. Zhang prefers conducting business in Mandarin. Should we arrange for a translator?" Harrison waved dismissively. "His assistant assured me Mr. Zhang speaks perfect English. Besides, we've updated our translation software on all hotel devices." He tapped his smartphone. Latest AI technology, practically human. As the meeting dispersed, Harrison stopped the head of housekeeping. "Emma, make sure your staff is invisible today. I want rooms maintained as if by magic. No guests should see your people working." Emma nodded. "Of course, sir. They know the drill." Outside the meeting room, the hotel transformed. Fresh flowers appeared in every corner. Staff practiced their most professional smiles. Security discreetly scanned the perimeter. The Wellington wasn't just a hotel today. It was a stage, and every employee an actor with a precisely defined role in an elaborately choreographed performance. At the center of it all stood Harrison, making minute adjustments to everything from the lobby's ambient music volume to the precise angle of the welcome banner. His 20-year rise from front desk clerk to general manager had been built on attention to such details. The Zhang meeting wasn't just about the hotel's future, it was about his own. The regional director had hinted that successfully securing this deal could mean a promotion to the corporate office. Harrison checked his watch. 1 hour until Zhang arrived. He straightened a slightly crooked painting and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Everything was perfect. Everything was under control. In the East Wing's executive suite, Olivia Thomas methodically refreshed the room, her movements efficient and practiced. At 32, she'd been part of the housekeeping staff for nearly 4 years. Invisible labor in a visible world of luxury. She tucked fresh Egyptian cotton sheets with hospital corners, aligning the monogrammed pillowcases with mathematical precision. From her cart, she selected the specific aromatherapy diffuser requested for this room. White tea and jasmine, imported from China's Fujian province. Proper diffusion requires placement away from direct sunlight, she murmured to herself in perfect Mandarin, adjusting the device's position. Her fingers briefly brushed against a book in her work bag, dog-eared pages of advanced international trade theory peeking out beside a well-worn Mandarin English dictionary. The walkie-talkie on her hip crackled. All housekeeping staff need to finish current rooms and remain in service areas, Emma's voice instructed. VIP arrival in 50 minutes. Understood, Olivia responded, quickening her pace. As she polished the bathroom fixtures, her reflection fragmented across the mosaic of mirrors. Bachelor's in International Relations. Master's in East Asian Linguistics. Fluent in Mandarin, proficient in Cantonese and Japanese. All leading to pushing a housekeeping cart through America's luxury hotels. 4 years ago, she'd returned from studying abroad in Beijing with dreams of working in international business. 300 rejection letters later, her student loans demanded payment. The Wellington had been hiring. Temporary, she'd told herself. Yet here she remained. She'd watched countless business meetings from the periphery, silently correcting mistranslations in her head while emptying wastebaskets. She'd overheard negotiations where millions changed hands while she earned minimum wage plus tips. The irony wasn't lost on her. In a globalized economy desperate for cultural bridges, her skills remained hidden behind a uniform that rendered her functionally invisible. As Olivia finished the suite, she glanced at her watch. Still time to review the Chinese economic journal she'd been reading during breaks. She pulled it from her bag as her phone buzzed with a notification from her student loan servicer. Payment past due. She sighed, tucking the journal away. Another day, another room, another chance to practice skills no one knew she possessed. She pushed her cart into the hallway, nodding politely as executives rushed past without seeing her. Just another invisible person in a building full of very important ones. At exactly 2:00 p.m., a fleet of black Mercedes SUVs pulled up to the Wellington's circular driveway. The doorman snapped to attention as the security team emerged first, scanning the entrance with practiced efficiency. Harrison stood at the front, surrounded by his executive team, all wearing their most welcoming smiles. The hotel lobby had been cleared of other guests, a testament to the importance of this arrival. When Mr. Zhang stepped from the second vehicle, the air seemed to electrify. Despite being in his 60s, he moved with the confidence of a much younger man. His charcoal suit was clearly bespoke, his red tie a splash of calculated power against the monochrome palette. Behind him followed 6 associates, each carrying identical leather portfolios. "Welcome to the Wellington Palace Hotel, Mr. Zhang." Harrison stepped forward with an extended hand. "We're honored by your presence." Zhang offered a curt nod and a brief handshake. Then, turning to his associates, he began speaking rapidly in Mandarin. The musical tones of the language filled the lobby as his team nodded and responded in kind. Harrison maintained his smile while panic flickered in his eyes. The conversation was clearly more extensive than simple pleasantries. He glanced at his smartphone, ready to deploy the translation app if necessary. One of Zhang's associates, a younger woman with sharp eyes, noticed Harrison's discomfort and spoke in accented English. "Mr. Zhang is expressing his initial impressions of your establishment. He appreciates the architecture." "Wonderful!" Harrison brightened. "Please let him know we've prepared the presidential suite according to his preferences, and our chef has created a special menu incorporating authentic Chinese cuisine." As the entourage moved toward the elevators, staff members appeared from seemingly nowhere to handle the luggage. In the background, Olivia pushed her cart along the perimeter of the lobby, keeping to the shadows as instructed. Her eyes followed the group, her ears picking up every word of the Mandarin conversation, including Mr. Zhang's actual comment. The decor is acceptable, but I'm concerned about their understanding of our needs. An hour later, Harrison led Mr. Zhang and his team on a tour of the hotel's premium facilities. They moved through the spa with its imported Japanese soaking tubs, past the Michelin-starred restaurant where the chef presented sample appetizers, and into the grand ballroom where Harrison enthusiastically described how it could be transformed for international conferences. Throughout the tour, Zhang spoke primarily to his team in Mandarin. His associate, introduced as Ms. Lin, provided occasional translations, but Harrison sensed he was missing critical information. Zhang's expressions remained unreadable. His questions filtered through layers of translation that seemed to dilute their meaning. As they entered the hotel's executive conference room for the formal presentation, Harrison felt sweat beading at his collar. The stakes were too high for miscommunication. Our presentation today outlines the investment opportunity, Harrison began as his team distributed leather-bound portfolios. We've included market analysis, revenue projections, and proposed expansion plans, Ms. Lin translated. But Zhang's attention had already shifted. He was asking something to his associates, gesturing toward the windows overlooking the city skyline. Mr. Zhang is inquiring about the local business district, Ms. Lin explained. Specifically, he wants to know about zoning regulations affecting hotel properties and how they compare to regulations in Shanghai. Harrison blinked, unprepared for such a specific question. Well, that's an excellent question. Perhaps I could have our legal team prepare a detailed response. Zhang interrupted with a longer question, his tone more insistent. Ms. Lin hesitated. He's asking about recent changes to foreign investment tax structures in this region, particularly how they affect hospitality holdings integrated with retail developments. The room temperature seemed to rise 10 degrees. Harrison's carefully planned presentation was derailing into territory he hadn't prepared for. He reached for his smartphone. Let me make sure I understand the question correctly, he said, opening his translation app and speaking into it. Could Mr. Zhang repeat his concerns about tax structures? Zhang spoke directly into the phone. The app processed for a moment, then produced something about chicken tax and hotel mooncake. The absurdity of the translation hung in the air. One of Zhang's associates stifled a laugh. Zhang's expression darkened. Harrison tried again, speaking more slowly into the device. This time, the translation came back as, Foreign money tree law, change question important now. Zhang set down his portfolio and said something sharp to Ms. Lin. She looked uncomfortable as she translated. Mr. Zhang wonders if you're properly prepared for this meeting. He says these are basic questions any hotel seeking international investment should anticipate. The presentation hadn't even properly begun, and already Harrison could feel the opportunity slipping away. He glanced desperately at his executive team, who looked back with equal helplessness. In the hallway outside, Olivia moved silently with her cleaning cart, catching fragments of the conversation through the partially open door. She winced at both the mangled translations and the increasing tension in the room. Harrison's heart hammered against his ribs as he fought to maintain his professional composure. 20 years of career building, hundreds of successful negotiations, and countless high-profile clients. None of it had prepared him for this unraveling moment. Perhaps we should take a brief recess, he suggested, his voice pitched slightly higher than normal. I can have our financial team join us to address these specific questions. As Ms. Lin translated, Zhang checked his platinum watch and exchanged a glance with his associates. The silent communication was clear. Their time was valuable, and it was being wasted. In that moment, Harrison's career flashed before his eyes. Not just the prestigious Wellington position, but the promised corporate promotion that would finally validate decades of sacrifices. The missed birthdays, the dissolved marriage, the postponed dreams, all justified by the steady climb up the hospitality ladder that now seemed to be collapsing beneath him. He loosened his collar discreetly, feeling a trickle of sweat run down his spine. The regional director would hear about this failure within hours. Competitors would circle like sharks at the first scent of blood. His reputation for flawless execution would be replaced by whispers of the Zhang disaster. "Mr. Zhang," Harrison said, summoning his most authoritative voice, "I assure you we value your time and investment consideration. If you'll allow me just 5 minutes to gather our specialists, we can address every question with the precision it deserves." Zhang responded with a curt nod and a brief comment in Mandarin. Ms. Lin translated. "Mr. Zhang says you have 5 minutes, but he is beginning to question whether the Wellington has the international sophistication his organization requires." Harrison nodded gratefully and backed out of the room, his confident smile dropping the instant the door closed behind him. "I don't care what you're doing. Drop everything and get to the executive conference room," Harrison hissed into his phone as he paced the hallway. "And bring anyone who speaks a word of Mandarin." The hotel's financial controller appeared first, breathless from running up 3 flights of stairs after the elevator proved too slow. "Zhang is asking about foreign investment tax structures and zoning regulations," Harrison explained rapidly. "Can you address that?" The controller paled. "I can cover the basic tax implications, but the international aspects, that's beyond my expertise." Harrison's personal assistant arrived next. "I've called the language service we use for the Japanese tour groups," she reported. "They're checking if they have a Mandarin translator available." "How long?" 30 minutes minimum." "We don't have 30 minutes. Harrison struggled to keep his voice down. "We have 3 minutes before I have to go back in there." The food and beverage director suggested using multiple translation apps simultaneously to cross-reference results. The sales director proposed focusing on the visual elements of their presentation to circumvent the language barrier. The head of security mentioned his cousin took Mandarin in college, though he lived 2 states away. Each suggestion hit the wall of impracticality as the minutes ticked by. Harrison's assistant returned, phone in hand. "The language service says their only Mandarin speaker called in sick. They're trying to locate a backup." Through the cracked door, Harrison could see Zhang checking his watch again, leaning over to whisper something to Ms. Lin. She nodded gravely. The IT manager joined the growing cluster of executives in the hallway. "The translation app is failing because it's programmed for conversational Mandarin, not business and legal terminology," he explained. "Even with a better connection, it wouldn't handle the specialized vocabulary." Harrison checked his watch. 4 minutes had passed. His 5-minute reprieve was over, and he had nothing to show for it except a growing sense of doom. "Options?" he demanded, looking around the circle of his most trusted team members. Silence. "Very well." He straightened his tie and took a deep breath. "I'll go back in and apologize for our unpreparedness. I'll request to reschedule the formal presentation for tomorrow, which gives us time to find a proper translator." Even as he said it, Harrison knew that rescheduling was tantamount to failure. In Zhang's world, second chances were rarely given. He pushed the door open and stepped back into the conference room, his career hanging by an increasingly frayed thread. "Mr. Zhang, I must apologize for the delay," Harrison began, the strain evident beneath his professional veneer. "I'm afraid we're experiencing some unexpected challenges with the technical aspects of our translation capabilities." Ms. Lin translated, her tone noticeably cooler than before. Zhang's response was brief and clipped. "Mr. Zhang says he understands that difficulties arise," Ms. Lin relayed. "However, he is concerned that a hotel seeking international investment appears unprepared for international communication." Harrison nodded, absorbing the diplomatic yet damning assessment. "We would like to suggest rescheduling our formal presentation for tomorrow morning, when we can ensure proper translation services are available." As Ms. Lin translated this proposal, Zhang's expression shifted from mere disappointment to something closer to decision. He conferred quietly with his associates, several of whom were already closing their portfolios and checking their phones. Ms. Lin hesitated before translating. "Mr. Zhang has appointments with 2 other hotel groups during his 3-day visit to the city. He says perhaps it would be more efficient to focus on those meetings instead. The carefully chosen words didn't mask the reality. Zhang was preparing to walk away. Not just from this meeting, but from the Wellington entirely. Harrison felt the blood drain from his face. Please assure Mr. Zhang that we value his time immensely. Perhaps we could continue with the portions of our presentation that don't require detailed translation, and I can have my team work through the night to prepare. Zhang held up his hand, silencing Harrison mid-sentence. He spoke directly to Ms. Lin, no longer bothering to include Harrison in his gaze. Ms. Lin's professional mask slipped slightly as she translated. Mr. Zhang is considering whether continuing this meeting is worthwhile. He suggests that a hotel unable to communicate effectively with international clients may not be prepared to serve an international clientele. Zhang turned to the associate on his left and murmured something that made the man nod and begin typing on his phone. Even without translation, the meaning was clear. Alternative arrangements were being considered. In the hallway outside, the executive team watched through the glass panel as their opportunity and Harrison's career teetered on the brink of collapse. Throughout the unfolding disaster, Olivia had remained in the hallway, ostensibly dusting the decorative moldings. 4 years of housekeeping had perfected her ability to become part of the background, invisible yet ever present. But unlike the executives who saw only crisis, she heard every word exchanged in both languages. She understood Zhang's frustration about specific regulatory changes affecting foreign investors in the hospitality sector. She recognized his references to municipal zoning ordinances that would impact potential property expansion. Most importantly, she caught the subtle implication in his tone that suggested this wasn't merely about translation. It was a test of the Wellington's global business acumen. As she wiped the same section of wall for the 3rd time, Olivia felt the familiar weight of decision pressing upon her. The same weight she'd felt with each rejection letter, with each loan payment notice, with each day her education and abilities remained hidden behind a gray uniform. Through the conference room's glass panel, she watched Harrison's increasingly desperate attempts to salvage the meeting. She saw Zhang's associates exchanging knowing glances. She noted Ms. Lin's subtle mistranslations that actually softened Zhang's more cutting remarks. Olivia's hand stilled on the wall. The executives huddled in the hallway were too absorbed in their panic to notice her, the invisible woman suddenly deep in thought. Olivia's mind raced. 4 years of careful separation between her work life and her capabilities. 4 years of protecting herself from the disappointment of being overlooked yet again. She had learned the hard way that offering her skills uninvited often led to skepticism rather than appreciation. The memory of her previous hotel job still stung. After helping Japanese guests with translation, she'd been reprimanded for overstepping rather than praised for her initiative. "Stay in your lane," the manager had advised. "Guests get uncomfortable when service staff act too educated." Since then, she'd kept her abilities carefully concealed, using her paycheck to slowly chip away at her student loans while applying for positions better suited to her qualifications every night after her shift. 217 applications in the past year alone, 63 interviews, 0 offers. Now, watching the Zhang meeting disintegrate, Olivia felt conflicting impulses collide. Professional self-preservation urged caution. Why risk humiliation for a company that saw her only as hands that cleaned rooms? What did she owe Harrison, who had never once looked her in the eye when passing in the hallway? Yet something deeper pulled against these practical concerns. Pride in her abilities, frustration at their continued waste, and perhaps most powerfully, a sudden, crystal-clear vision of Zhang walking away, taking with him not just Harrison's opportunity, but hers as well. If the Wellington secured Zhang's investment, expansion would follow. New positions would open, international connections would form. For the first time in years, Olivia felt the stirring of genuine possibility. Her hand moved to her employee badge, the small plastic rectangle that identified her only as housekeeping staff. The moment of decision had arrived. Olivia removed her cleaning gloves and tucked them into her apron pocket. She smoothed back a strand of hair that had escaped her practical bun and straightened her shoulders. 4 years of invisibility were about to end. Inside the conference room, Zhang was already gathering his materials. Harrison's face had taken on the waxy pallor of a man watching his career evaporate before his eyes. "Mr. Zhang," Ms. Lin was saying, "perhaps we should consider our afternoon appointment at—" "Excuse me?" Olivia's voice cut through the tension as she stepped into the doorway. Every head turned, expressions ranging from confusion to irritation at the interruption. Harrison recovered first. "Not now," he said sharply, making a dismissive gesture. "We're in the middle of an important meeting." Olivia ignored him, focusing instead on Zhang. She took a deep breath and spoke in perfect, academically precise Mandarin. "Respected Mr. Zhang, I couldn't help but overhear your questions about the recent amendments to foreign investment regulations. Perhaps I might offer some assistance with translation." The room froze. Zhang's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise, the first unguarded expression he'd shown since arriving. Ms. Lin's mouth opened slightly. The associates exchanged glances of confusion. Harrison stared at Olivia as if she'd suddenly materialized from another dimension. What are you doing?" he stammered. Zhang recovered quickly, studying Olivia with new interest. He responded in rapid Mandarin, deliberately using complex financial terminology and regional dialect variations, testing her. "Your Mandarin is exceptional," he said. "Perhaps you can explain how the city's new vertical zoning allowances might affect a mixed-use development incorporating both hotel and retail spaces?" Without hesitation, Olivia responded with a detailed explanation of the recent zoning changes, citing the specific municipal codes and comparing them to similar regulations in major Chinese cities. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the room transformed. Zhang's associates straightened in their chairs, several taking notes. Ms. Lin watched with professional assessment, her expression a mixture of surprise and respect. Harrison's shock gave way to confusion, then to the dawning realization of unexpected salvation. His eyes darted between Olivia and Zhang, tracking the animated conversation he couldn't understand but could clearly see was going well. "If you don't mind my asking," Zhang said, gesturing to Olivia's housekeeping uniform, "how does someone with your linguistic abilities and knowledge of international business regulations come to be working in this capacity?" Before Olivia could answer, Harrison stepped forward, his composure partially recovered. "I believe we should continue this conversation properly," he said, pulling out a chair at the conference table. "Please, join us." "I'm sorry, your name is—" "Olivia," she said simply. "Olivia Thomas." Harrison's smile didn't reach his eyes as he guided Olivia to a seat at the conference table. "Ms. Thomas will assist with translation while we locate our professional interpreter," he explained to the room, his tone suggesting this was a temporary measure, a band-aid rather than a solution. Leaning close to Olivia, he whispered urgently, "What department are you with exactly?" "Housekeeping, sir," Olivia replied, maintaining her composure despite the tension crackling around her. Harrison's smile faltered. "Housekeeping," he repeated, as if the word itself were problematic. His eyes flicked nervously to Zhang, who was watching their exchange with interest. "And you speak Mandarin? How exactly?" "I studied at Beijing University," Olivia said. "I have a master's in East Asian linguistics and international business relations." The information hit Harrison like a physical blow. His whisper became more strained. "And you didn't think to mention this during the hiring process?" "It was on my resume," Olivia replied simply. Page 2, under educational background. Before Harrison could respond, Zhang addressed Olivia directly in Mandarin, asking about her thoughts on the hotel's positioning for Asian tourism markets. As Olivia began to answer, Harrison interrupted. "Perhaps we should stay focused on the investment presentation," he suggested, reclaiming control of the meeting. "Ms. Thomas can translate my points for Mr. Zhang, but let's maintain our agenda." He signaled to his assistant, who hurried forward with the presentation materials. Tell Mr. Zhang we'll proceed with our overview of the investment opportunity, he instructed Olivia, his tone making it clear she was to serve as a conduit, not a participant. Olivia translated Harrison's request, but Zhang waved it away, continuing his direct conversation with her about international market positioning. Harrison cleared his throat loudly. Ms. Thomas, please explain to Mr. Zhang that we have prepared an extensive presentation on exactly these topics, which I would be happy to walk him through. The underlying message was unmistakable. Return to your proper place. You are here to translate, not contribute. Olivia hesitated, caught between her momentary visibility and the habit of professional acquiescence that had sustained her employment for 4 years. The conference room had become a battlefield of unspoken power dynamics. Harrison stood at the head of the table, presentation remote in hand, his authority visibly challenged. Zhang remained seated, his attention fixed on Olivia rather than the presentation screen. The executive team hovered uncertainly near the walls, while Zhang's associates watched the unfolding situation with analytical interest. Olivia felt the weight of every gaze. This moment, this exact crystalline moment, would determine whether she stepped back into invisibility or finally claimed the professional recognition she'd spent years preparing for. She turned to Harrison, speaking in English so everyone would understand. Mr. Harrison, Mr. Zhang is specifically interested in how the Wellington plans to adapt to Chinese business travelers' expectations. He's concerned that the presentation materials reflect Western assumptions about luxury accommodations rather than Chinese preferences. Harrison's expression tightened. And how exactly would you know what's in our presentation materials, Ms. Thomas? The question hung in the air, pointed, accusatory. Olivia straightened in her chair. I wouldn't, but I do know that Mr. Zhang just expressed that concern to his associates. She switched to Mandarin, addressing Zhang directly. Mr. Zhang, perhaps I could provide some context. My name is Olivia Thomas. I hold degrees in international business relations and East Asian linguistics. I lived in Beijing for 5 years while completing my education, and I've worked extensively on cross-cultural business communication. She paused, then added in English for the benefit of the room. I'm currently part of the housekeeping staff here at the Wellington, but my background might be helpful in facilitating today's discussion. The directness of her self-introduction silenced the room. Harrison's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. One of the executive team members whispered something to another, both glancing between Olivia and Harrison with undisguised surprise. Zhang studied Olivia for a long moment before responding in Mandarin. A person with your qualifications working in housekeeping? This is most unusual. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, Olivia replied with dignity. But perhaps today that unusual path might benefit everyone in this room. Zhang nodded slowly, then turned to Harrison. With Ms. Lin now translating his words, he said, I would like Ms. Thomas to participate in this meeting not merely as a translator, but as someone who understands both our cultures. If she has insights into how your hotel might better serve Chinese clients, I wish to hear them. It wasn't a request. It was a directive from a man accustomed to having his preferences accommodated. Harrison's knuckles whitened around the presentation remote as he forced a smile. Of course, Mr. Zhang, we're all about discovering hidden talent. Perhaps we should restart the presentation, Harrison suggested, attempting to regain control of the meeting. Ms. Thomas can translate as we... If I may, Olivia interjected in Mandarin, addressing Zhang directly. I believe your primary concern was about recent regulatory changes affecting foreign investment in hospitality properties, specifically regarding the new municipal zoning codes that came into effect last quarter. Zhang nodded, leaning forward with interest. The city has indeed implemented changes that actually favor international investors in the hospitality sector, Olivia continued, her Mandarin flowing with the confidence of academic precision. The most significant is the tax abatement program for properties incorporating cultural exchange elements, something that would align perfectly with your investment portfolio's emphasis on cross-cultural hospitality experiences. As she spoke, Zhang's associates began taking detailed notes. Ms. Lin, no longer needed as the primary translator, observed Olivia with professional assessment. Olivia seamlessly shifted to addressing the specific questions Zhang had asked earlier about vertical zoning allowances, drawing parallels to similar regulations in Shanghai and Beijing. Her explanation included nuanced comparisons between Chinese and American regulatory approaches, contextualizing the information in a framework immediately recognizable to Zhang. This area of the city was rezoned last year to permit integrated commercial hospitality developments up to 40 stories, she explained, gesturing toward the window overlooking the business district. The Wellington's location is particularly valuable because it falls within both the tourism corridor and the international business zone, qualifying for dual-category tax incentives. Harrison watched in astonishment as Zhang nodded with increasing enthusiasm, asking follow-up questions that Olivia answered without hesitation. The conversation had transformed from a halting, translation-dependent exchange into a fluid, sophisticated discussion of international business opportunities. For the first time since the meeting began, Zhang smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his stern countenance. "You understand our perspective," he said to Olivia. "This is refreshing. Most American businesses approach Chinese investors with assumptions that miss cultural nuances critical to successful partnerships." Harrison glanced at his executive team, silently communicating a clear message. Whatever was happening, it was working. The deal might be saved after all, though not in the way anyone had anticipated. As the conversation progressed, Zhang's curiosity about Olivia became evident. Between discussions of investment strategies and market analyses, he asked about her background. "You mentioned Beijing University," he said. "What led you there?" "I received a prestigious scholarship during my undergraduate studies," Olivia explained, briefly translating the exchange for Harrison's benefit. "I was originally focused on international relations, but became fascinated by the critical role of language in global business negotiations." She described her 5 years in China, beginning with intensive language immersion, followed by specialized business courses taught entirely in Mandarin. Her thesis had examined cross-cultural communication strategies in luxury hospitality settings across Asian markets. "My professor was Dr. Li Wei at the School of Economics," she added. Zhang's eyebrows rose. "Dr. Li is my wife's cousin, a brilliant economist." This unexpected connection shifted the atmosphere further. Zhang was no longer merely impressed by Olivia's language skills. He now viewed her through the lens of shared academic networks and cultural understanding. Harrison, sensing the conversation's importance despite understanding only fragments, asked Olivia to explain what was being discussed. "Mr. Zhang and I discovered we have a connection through my former professor at Beijing University," she summarized. "We're discussing how my research on luxury hospitality in Asian markets might be relevant to his investment considerations." Harrison nodded, his expression a complex mixture of relief at the meeting's positive turn and discomfort at the revelation that a housekeeping employee possessed qualifications exceeding most of his executive team. "And how exactly did someone with your background end up—" Harrison gestured vaguely at her uniform, letting the question hang unfinished. "That's a longer story," Olivia replied with diplomatic brevity, turning back to Zhang to continue their discussion. The conversation evolved beyond mere translation into a sophisticated exploration of cross-market hospitality investment strategies. Olivia wasn't simply conveying words between languages. She was bridging business cultures, providing insights that neither Harrison nor Zhang had anticipated. The Wellington's current design already incorporates several elements that Chinese luxury travelers value, she noted, gesturing to the conference room's layout. The emphasis on privacy, the Eastern exposure of premium suites, the attention to water features in common areas, these align with feng shui principles that matter to discerning Chinese clients. She then shifted to addressing specific weaknesses, translating her observations for Harrison's benefit. The hotel lacks dedicated tea service areas and has limited multi-generational accommodation options, which are critical for Chinese family travelers, she explained. Additionally, The current digital payment systems don't integrate with platforms like WeChat Pay or Alipay, which Chinese business travelers expect. Harrison blinked, taken aback by the precision of her analysis. These were issues his team hadn't even considered. Zhang nodded appreciatively. "You understand nuances that most Western hospitality groups miss entirely," he said. "These are exactly the adaptation points we look for when considering investment partners." Olivia's knowledge extended beyond theoretical understanding. When Zhang inquired about specific competitor properties in his portfolio, she offered detailed comparisons drawn from her academic research, providing context that impressed even Zhang's specialized associates. As the discussion progressed, Harrison watched his presentation, the one he'd spent weeks perfecting, remain unused on the screen. Instead, Olivia had created something far more valuable, a dynamic, responsive conversation that addressed Zhang's actual concerns rather than following a predetermined script. When Zhang mentioned a particular challenge his other properties faced with regulatory compliance, Olivia suggested an innovative structural approach that would satisfy both American and Chinese requirements. The solution was so practical that Zhang asked one of his associates to make detailed notes. "This is precisely the kind of creative problem-solving that successful international ventures require," Zhang remarked, clearly impressed. "Where did the Wellington find you?" Before Olivia could answer, Harrison interjected, "Ms. Thomas is a recent addition to our international relations team." The lie hung awkwardly in the air as Olivia's uniform told a different story. After nearly an hour of productive discussion, Zhang turned to Harrison with newfound respect, speaking through Ms. Lin's translation. "Your hotel has impressive potential for integration into our international portfolio," he said. "Ms. Thomas has highlighted compatibility factors I hadn't previously considered." Harrison nodded, relief washing over his features. "We're fortunate to have her expertise available today." Zhang's gaze shifted between Olivia's professional demeanor and her housekeeping uniform, the contrast increasingly impossible to ignore. "May I ask," he said directly to Harrison, "what is Ms. Thomas's official position at the Wellington?" The question landed like a stone in still water. The executive team shifted uncomfortably. Harrison's smile froze. Before he could formulate a response, Zhang continued. "Because someone with her qualifications, language proficiency, and business acumen would typically hold a senior position in my organization." Ms. Lin translated with precision, adding no diplomatic buffer to Zhang's pointed observation. Harrison cleared his throat. "Ms. Thomas currently works in our housekeeping department." Zhang's expression registered genuine shock. He turned to Olivia and switched to Mandarin. "You maintain rooms with these credentials?" "Yes," she replied simply, maintaining her dignity. "It's honest work while I continue seeking opportunities better aligned with my education." Zhang shook his head in disbelief. "This is a significant oversight. In my companies, we have extensive talent identification programs specifically to prevent such misalignments." He turned back to Harrison, his gaze sharper than before. "Mr. Harrison, I find it concerning that your organization has someone of Ms. Thomas's caliber cleaning rooms rather than contributing to your international business strategy." The criticism was delivered with the calm precision of a surgeon's scalpel, bloodless yet devastating in its accuracy. Harrison's face flushed as the implications of Zhang's observation rippled through the room. The executive team exchanged uncomfortable glances. Emma, the head of housekeeping who had slipped into the back of the room during the discussion, stared at Olivia with newfound awareness. "There has clearly been a misunderstanding of Ms. Thomas's qualifications," Harrison said, his voice strained with forced cordiality. "Rest assured, we value all our employees and are always looking to optimize talent placement." The hollow corporate speak sounded particularly inadequate following the authentic conversation Zhang and Olivia had been having. In that moment, Harrison saw his hotel and his management approach through Zhang's eyes. Not just a failure of language preparation, but a systemic failure to recognize and utilize the human capital already within their walls. How many other Olivias might be hidden throughout his organization, their talents untapped, their potential squandered? The realization was both professional and personal. Harrison had prided himself on running a meritocratic operation, yet here was evidence of a blindness so fundamental it challenged his entire leadership philosophy. "Ms. Thomas," he said, turning to Olivia with genuine contrition in his voice, "it appears we owe you an apology, and perhaps a conversation about your future with the Wellington." As the meeting concluded, Zhang extended his hand to Olivia. "I have been impressed not only by your language skills, but by your understanding of cross-cultural business dynamics," he said in Mandarin. "My organization is always seeking individuals who can bridge Eastern and Western business practices." He withdrew a business card from his pocket, not the standard card he had distributed earlier, but a distinctive black card with gold embossing that he presented with both hands in the traditional Chinese manner. "My private contact information," he explained. "Should you be interested in exploring opportunities with Zhang International, I would personally review your application." Olivia accepted the card with appropriate respect, recognizing the significance of the gesture. "Thank you for your consideration, Mr. Zhang. It would be an honor." Harrison, watching the exchange he couldn't understand but whose importance was obvious, stepped forward. "Ms. Thomas, we should discuss your role at the Wellington immediately following this meeting." His tone had transformed from dismissive to solicitous in the span of an hour. Zhang nodded approvingly at Harrison's belated recognition. "I will be recommending the Wellington to my associates," he announced through Ms. Lin's translation. "But I would suggest a serious review of your talent management practices. In today's global economy, overlooking capabilities like Ms. Thomas's is not merely an oversight, it's a competitive disadvantage." Harrison nodded, absorbing the graciously delivered rebuke. "Your insight is appreciated, Mr. Zhang. I assure you we'll be implementing changes." As the meeting dispersed, the executive team surrounded Zhang, escorting him toward the presidential suite for a celebratory tea service. The crisis had transformed into triumph, the investment opportunity rescued from the brink of disaster. In the momentary quiet of the emptying conference room, Olivia stood alone, still processing the seismic shift in her circumstances. The weight of invisibility had lifted, replaced by the vertigo of sudden recognition. Emma approached hesitantly. "I had no idea," she said, gesturing to the conference table where Olivia had demonstrated her capabilities. "All this time—" "It's all right," Olivia replied, her fingers lightly touching Zhang's business card. "Some talents are just waiting for the right moment to be discovered." 1 month later, Olivia stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor of the Wellington Palace Hotel. Her gray housekeeping uniform had been replaced by a tailored charcoal suit, her practical work shoes upgraded to modest heels that clicked confidently against the marble floor. The employee badge hanging from her lapel now read Director of International Guest Relations, a position created specifically for her. As she passed the front desk, several staff members nodded respectfully. The same employees who had once looked through her now saw her clearly. Her new office, formerly a rarely used conference room, had been renovated to include elements reflecting her cross-cultural expertise. A traditional Chinese tea set shared space with modern technology. The bookshelf displayed linguistic reference texts alongside hospitality management volumes. On her desk sat 2 framed items: her master's degree from Beijing University, finally displayed professionally after years in storage, and a letter of intent from Zhang International confirming the Wellington as their newest portfolio property. Harrison had offered the position the same day as the Zhang meeting, along with a salary that finally allowed her to move her student loan status from delinquent to manageable. But more valuable than the compensation was the opportunity to fully utilize her skills and education for the first time since returning from China. Her invisibility had ended. Her real work had begun. In the hotel's main conference room, Olivia stood before 30 staff members from various departments: housekeeping, maintenance, food service, front desk, and concierge. Each wore their standard uniform, but today they weren't here to clean or serve. They were here to be seen. Welcome to the first session of the Wellington's Hidden Talents Initiative, Olivia began. Each of you was invited because you indicated on our survey that you possess skills, education, or language abilities not currently utilized in your position. On the screen behind her, a simple mission statement appeared, recognizing the whole person behind every position. 1 month ago, I was pushing a housekeeping cart outside this very room, she continued. Today, I'm helping restructure our guest services to better serve international clients. This transformation wasn't because I suddenly gained new abilities. It was because circumstances finally made my existing abilities visible. She clicked to the next slide, showing statistics from their staff survey. 40% spoke at least one language besides English. 65% held degrees or certifications unrelated to their current positions. 78% possessed specialized skills they never used at work. This isn't just about language skills, Olivia emphasized. It's about recognizing that every person who works here brings their whole self to the Wellington, not just the parts we see in their job descriptions. Harrison, standing at the back of the room, nodded approvingly. The initiative had been his idea, a systematic approach to prevent future Olivia situations, as the executive team now called them. Today, Olivia continued, we'll begin creating professional development pathways that align your hidden talents with the hotel's needs. Because excellence in service begins with recognizing excellence in our own people. The evening sun cast long shadows across the Wellington's grand lobby as Olivia completed her final task of the day, welcoming a delegation of business travelers from Shanghai. Her Mandarin flowed effortlessly as she explained the hotel's amenities, including their new Chinese tea service and WeChat payment integration. As the guests proceeded to the elevator, she noticed a young man in a maintenance uniform carefully adjusting a lighting fixture. She had seen him at the Hidden Talents session earlier, an engineering student working part-time while completing his degree. Their eyes met briefly, a moment of recognition between two people who understood what it meant to be more than their uniforms suggested. In her month as director, Olivia had already identified 17 employees with valuable untapped abilities. 3 had been promoted, 5 had received additional compensation for utilizing their language skills, and all had experienced the fundamental dignity of being fully seen. The true value of a person, like a precious stone, isn't diminished by being temporarily overlooked. Its worth remains intact, waiting for the moment when the right eyes finally see its brilliance. In your workplace, your community, perhaps even in your home. Who might be invisible right now? What extraordinary talents lie hidden behind ordinary titles? And what might happen if you were the one to finally see them? If this story resonated with you, don't keep it hidden. Subscribe to Beat Stories now and hit that like button. Every week, we bring you powerful narratives that reveal the extraordinary within the ordinary. Join our community of storytellers and truth seekers because everyone deserves to be seen. Beat Stories, where every untold story finds its voice.
What happened today isn't just a story. It's a reminder. Silence protects systems, but courage rewrites them. At Beat Stories, we don't just watch change, we document it. Subscribe for more real stories that challenge power and amplify truth.